edition of the Steve Beaman Journey. This is where we walk together each day down the 5 paths to a transformed life. We talk about emotional health, financial health, intellectual health, physical health, and indeed spiritual health. Today, Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, you and I are walking down the intellectual path. This is the path of truth, logic, and discernment. Without clarity of mind, you see, none of the other paths can stand. So let's unpack today's headlines as we do every day and journey down the intellectual path on this episode of the Steve Beaman Journey. It's Monday, October 13th, and welcome to the Steve Beaman Journey. Today, as we do...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In a world of uncertainty, where business, freedom, and the future hang in the balance, one voice rises with clarity, experience, wisdom, and conviction. This is the Steve Beaman Show, the voice of the independent American.
You have to appreciate that mistake. I do record this. It's not record, I should say. I do broadcast it live. And my hope by doing it live is that eventually, as we build listenership and we build people that are following us, we can actually take live questions. And so there is sometimes a little boo-boo on my part where I hit the wrong scene to come up. And I do run this through a broadcast system. It's kind of complicated to do by myself, but I'm kind of the only one doing this right now. So it's me, myself, and I. But anyway, thanks for putting up with it. I appreciate it very much. I also want to say thanks once again for joining me. It's a privilege to come to you each and every day with my thoughts and my ideas on the 5 paths to a transformed life and the news of the day. There's an awful lot going on in our worlds, and this kind of starts because years ago I started to see a transition coming to the U.S. economy. I began to see truly us going to a point of a digital economy where the labor thing's going to be so displaced that we're all going to need help, and we're going to get that from each other. So I started thinking about how we could build the whole person and how we could help them in this time of transition. And it came to me over time that the 5 paths are what I wanted to work on. So I'm anxious to talk each day with you. Today is Wednesday, so we're on the intellectual path. Join us tomorrow for the physical path. We'll have new ideas on physical health. And then, of course, Friday is the spiritual path. But today, I want to talk about the intellectual path because truth, we have infinite data, you and I, through our phones, our PCs, and our laptops and everything else. We have all the information we need. And this is especially true for the Gen Z and Millennials and Gen A. They've all got more information than they know what to do with. But we're shrinking in our wisdom. We're shrinking in our ability to put context around all of this information, to put it into a framework that you and I can use to thrive. So today, we're going to walk down that intellectual path and see if we can't come up with some ideas on how to build a more robust intellectual life. But let's talk first about some of the hot news of the day. And the biggest thing that I see for everybody is this shutdown still. Washington's latest shutdown is, of course, turning into the familiar circus. That's exactly what it becomes. Airlines are now starting to report significant delays as the FAA scales back operations, and even TSA has less people to, take care of those lines. Families are stranded, businesses are furious, and travelers in general are fuming as this is just beginning to hit the ripple of the holiday season. It's just nothing new. This is no longer about budgets in Washington. As you know, it's about pride and about mindsets. But it does seem, and I've lived through them a lot, it seems like about every September, Congress goes through this. But let me touch why this one's different. I think this is clearly caused by the Democratic Party, and I think they're shooting themselves in the foot, and this is committing almost, political party suicide. The fact of the matter is they're holding the American people hostage to have changes made to the budget. Well, this is not the time to do that. A continuing resolution, which, by the way, continues the budget of the Biden administration. So this isn't continuing Trump stuff. This is continuing Biden stuff. But instead of just continuing that and giving themselves time to go deal with this in regular order, they've decided to hold the American people hostage. I think they're going to suffer for it. I think it's just one more reason people are going to turn away from the Democratic Party. They are the anti-Trump party, and that's about all they've got going for them. But I think this whole thing, again, every September we see it. Every September you hear, oh, we have emergency meetings. We have all these continuing resolutions and finger pointing. I mean, the actors change. Absolutely, the actors change. But the script never does. It's government, and it's government as theater. And we're the ones who pay the price, and we are, of course, the captive audience to it. Now, when dysfunction like this becomes routine, cynicism becomes culture. And when cynicism becomes culture, truth loses its meaning. Slogans replace solutions, and noise replaces knowledge. Exactly what we're seeing. Confidence in Congress is now single digits. Now, with that, understand that if you go back over time, nobody's ever liked Congress. There's an old famous thing that everybody loves their congressperson, but everybody hates Congress. So this isn't really new. The distrust and disdain for Congress is an American thing. It goes back to the founding of the country. But today, it's not just about public disillusionment. It's grown a little bit because it's about feeling intellectually betrayed, which we have been. Institutions that were meant to serve us with reason and logic now just serve rhetoric. Government, instead of being a steward of understanding, has become an amplifier of ignorance. And nowhere is that more visible than in my other headline. Let's go to Letitia James and the politics of hypocrisy. After years of wielding her office as a sword, indicting her enemies, most notably Donald Trump, and she did that, of course, with moral zeal. Well, she now faces her own ethical charges and criminal charges. The irony writes itself. I mean, this truth is greater than fiction, right? And these politicians set themselves up so that the hypocrisy and the irony of their lives is more than we need to just create humorous stories. I mean, this is just ridiculous. This self-appointed champion of justice is accused of breaking the very laws that she's preached to enforce. It's unbelievable. It's not just scandal, it's sanctimony. I mean, she and other leaders talk endlessly about accountability for others, but they exempt themselves. I mean, the double standard corrodes faith, and it corrodes faith in law faster than any statute ever could. And the hypocrisy, and the reason it's so important is it's not just a moral failure. I mean, this hypocrisy is intellectual dishonesty. It tells you and me and our children that truth is situational. Rules are relative. Well, that's unhealthy at the core. If there is no truth and no rules that apply to everybody, how does this thing work? It doesn't. Because once that idea seeps in, justice stops being blind and it starts being branded. We weaponize outrage and we monetize division. This is ours, and I'll say it's ours, but it's the mind's surrender to ideology. It's when intellect bows to this that freedom is the next to fall. And we see this hypocrisy everywhere, by the way, from Bernie Sanders and AOC flying around in their private jets, preaching about how bad the millionaires and billionaires are, all the while just extracting more and more donations from their base. These are people who are unaware and unwise and give money because they're angry and they don't know where else to go. I mean, I did a phantom post yesterday just for grins. I posted after watching Bernie, and I said, I'm going to run for office. And I said, I'm thinking of running for office, and here's my platform, a 25-hour work week. He had said 35, so I thought I'd one-up him. So a 25-hour work week, a 25-hour minimum wage, free health care, free universal high-speed internet, and I even said a free car. Now, what shocked me about this was how many people jumped on the bandwagon and said, I'd vote for you. Is it true that we buy our votes with promises now? And that the more you promise, the more votes you get? Could any of us just go out? I mean, I think to myself, I'll just go be a Democrat and I'll offer everybody everything and go give speeches and make a living. The problem is that's not truth. The problem is that is hypocrisy at the highest possible levels. When the hypocrisy has gotten so surreal, I mean, it's just outrageous. Have you heard about insider trading? We've talked before, and you know this, that it's legal for the Congress to insider trade. You and I go to jail for it. They get rewarded. Where's the incentive in that? I don't know. And there's even more and worse hypocrisy. Look at the January 6th people. I mean, compare this. This was said that this was an attempt to overthrow our government. This was a threat to the very democracy we enjoy. But where were these same people in the summer of love in 2020 when countless businesses were burned down? Countless. Was that not an attack on our democracy? Or when an attempt was made on Judge Kavanaugh's life? Was that not a threat to our democracy? Well, only January 6th matters to these people because it affected these people in Washington who think they're so good, they're so smart, and they're so special that they're exempt from the laws. Burn down a small business in America and you're fine. Walk through the halls of Congress and, God forbid, sit in Nancy Pelosi's chair behind her desk and you're prison bound. And as we see this hypocrisy and this downgrading of Washington and the belief we have in our institutions, nowhere do we see it more than in our classroom education. And as today's on the intellectual path, it's appropriate to take a look at today's schools. We have gone from teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, to a new 3. And those 3 are resentment, revisionism, and rebellion. This is perhaps the closest window into our national confusion. Across America, as you see it, American schools are devolving from laboratories of learning into battlefields of culture. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, as I said, have been replaced by resentment, revisionism, and rebellion. Teachers' unions, they just push politics instead of learning. I'm not saying the teachers do. The vast majority of teachers are wonderful people, but the teachers' unions are more involved in their own power and political stability than they are the education of our kids. Students are taught now that feelings outweigh facts and that self-esteem triumphs discipline. I mean, students, I remember, I go back kind of far, and I remember in the 90s there was a study done of self-esteem. So they studied high school students, college students, business people, families, prisons, and they tried to determine who had the highest self-esteem. Much to the surprise of the researchers, the highest self-esteem was in Stateville Prison in Illinois. Well, it seems that these prisoners, the worse crime they commit, the higher their self-esteem. They feel pretty good about themselves. They just completely lack empathy. That's the danger we have of self-esteem over a controlled self-esteem with a spiritual path and an intellectual honesty. Self-esteem in its own vacuum is a very dangerous cocktail. So our schools anymore are not about education. They're about indoctrination. They produce followers, not thinkers. And every great civilization has crumbled when it stopped teaching their young people how to think, but instead taught them what to think. We are perilously close to that line. But yet, amid this educational turmoil, a bright spark appeared this week, and I want to mention it and give a call out to it. Charlie Kirk posthumously received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Kudos to him, and thank you to President Donald Trump for recognizing it. He was an outspoken supporter of free speech, deep thought, and a civil society, and in return for that, they killed him. Well, this award, regardless of politics, it symbolizes something larger than that, and that's a national argument of truth itself. I mean, half the country saw this as a victory with Charlie, right? We saw him as a victory for courage and conviction, but the other half saw defiance and heresy. I mean, the divide anymore in our country isn't about policy, it's about perception. We no longer debate ideas. We've lost that. We delegitimize people. We ask not, is he right? But rather we ask, whose side is he on? I mean, dialogue has been replaced by division, and that is a dangerous place for any society to live. So today, as you and I walk together down the intellectual path, let's talk about reclaiming truth, reclaiming that in the mind in the age of manipulation. The emotional path that we talked about yesterday teaches us to feel rightly. Well, the intellectual path teaches us to think rightly. Truth once served as a compass in our country and for us individually. Now it becomes the casualty of convenience. It's time for us, though, to rediscover it. It's time for us to rethink how the intellectual path matters, not through politics or technology, but through personal discipline. We have to have the courage to ask questions, to reason, and to begin again to believe in truth itself. Now this, friends, as we break between this opening segment and my final segment is where someday I'll put in a commercial break. If you know anybody who wants to sponsor me, let me know. We'll throw them in here right in the middle. But I want to continue today since I don't have that. And I am with you live. And I really, as I said, I appreciate your joining me. I hope that you're finding value in this discussion. And as I said to you, and I've talked to you a lot, I'm on this journey as well. So these lessons that I write are for me as much as for you. They're universal, and I hope that you find benefit with them. So today's program, I think about it as being brought to you by those who still believe that thinking is an act of courage. I mean, if you're ready to take back your emotional and financial and physical independence, visit stevebeaman.com and join the movement, if you will. So the intellectual path that we're on today it is not about collecting information. It is about cultivating discernment. We're drowning in data. We're starving for wisdom. Every scroll and swipe, it feeds us facts, but feeds those facts without framework. It feeds us opinions without obligation. The danger of this digital age that we're in, and I've talked about this for years, it's not ignorance. It's intellectual overload. I mean, when everything seems true, nothing is true. When every opinion carries equal weight, wisdom loses authority. I mean, we take artificial intelligence, social media, and mass communications. They've given us tools with infinite reach. But they've also built echo chambers of infinite reinforcement. You can live an entire digital life today with ever encountering a thought that disagrees with you. That's not freedom. My friends, that's intellectual captivity. So the intellectual path that we're on begins the moment you stop outsourcing your thinking to that echo chamber in many cases. Stop saying they say. Instead, start asking, who are they? Test what you're told, not with criticism, but with curiosity. What's the motive behind the message? Who are they trying to sell? What base are they trying to attract? And that leads us to critical versus cynical thinking. Because we're told we should question everything, but that isn't necessarily the same as critically thinking. Critical thinking seeks truth above all things. Cynical thinking assumes there is none. One opens the mind, one poisons it. So cynicism, let's call it lazy skepticism. No effort, no evidence, no courage. It's easy to say everything's corrupt. It's harder to find something to believe in. In fact, I was watching Hugh Hewitt the other day on an interview he had about one time presenting to a group of atheists. And he, at the beginning of the session, asked the atheists to raise their hand if they had ever questioned their atheism. Not one person did. Now, Hugh's point to that was, if you ask people of faith how many people have questioned their faith, virtually all of us at some point would raise our hand. But when he asks atheists, they don't question their faith. It's the ultimate belief system. That's cynical thinking. They've accepted there's no truth, and so they don't even try to find the truth. They've given up. That's not what we want. Truth is lonely, and it's a lonely position. When you see clearly in a fogged world, you're going to be called arrogant. There's no question about that. And when you speak plainly in a noisy room, you'll be called extreme. Think about that. Extreme truth. But that's when you become part of independent thinking. And that is your and my ticket to freedom. You see, long before algorithms, Socrates, and you've all heard this story, but he was executed for asking questions the powerful didn't want to answer. It goes back that far. Galileo, he was silenced for saying the earth moved. Jefferson risked his life on the radical idea that truth was self-evident. I mean, each generation fights its own battle for truth. Ours isn't fought in the federal courts and cathedrals, but in the human mind, battling this avalanche of content. The new weapon, and this is something I've thought a lot about because I do a lot of reading about NATO and about the Russian situation in Ukraine and the possibility of global thermonuclear war, and it's really, really small. The fact is there's no win, and everybody knows it, so they don't do it. So what I've thought about is the new weapons of war, they're not going to be bombs. They're going to be bits. The synthetic voices, fabricated faces, and deep fake videos that will blur reality until belief itself becomes suspect. That's the new battlefield. Into this chaos, of course, truth is no longer a shared discovery, but it's a personal decision. And that's dangerous. When truth, when we can't agree on what's real, how do we agree on what's truth? And when every person can define their own truth, because there is no self-evident truth that goes universally, we end up in a nation like we are today, a nation in chaos. The intellectual path requires a new kind of literacy for all of us, and I call that digital discernment. Before sharing anything, we have to ask, who benefits if I go down this path of belief? I mean, that simple question is the modern shield of the wise. There is a paradox that we're creating with AI, and you look at artificial intelligence, it can calculate faster than any human alive. That's a good thing, and wait until neural computing comes on. It's going to change everything. But it doesn't care. It doesn't mimic wisdom. It can never possess that. That's uniquely human. It can generate text, but not truth. The printing press gave power to thinkers. It may be that AI gives power to manipulators. We've created tools that extend intelligence, but they threaten individuality. When machines think for us, and we need to really understand this, but when machines think for us, we stop thinking for ourselves. So stay master of your machines, not servant to them. Use AI to inform you, not to define you. The moment we surrender judgment to automation, we become programmable. And being programmable is the antithesis of freedom. So to walk this path, to speak truth even when it costs you, to say this is right even when the crowd says be quiet. Truth has never been popular. It's been mocked, censored, and crucified. But it always survives. The great thinkers, again, Socrates, Jefferson, Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and yes, Charlie Kirk, didn't chase consensus. They pursued conscience. We need that spirit once again in our schools, in our media, our politics, and even in our churches. How many churches have given up on truth and gone to the relativism of the recent past? Moral relativism is a cancer on our society and must be replaced with the truth of God's scriptures. We have to remember that intellectual cowardice is this modern epidemic. People are so afraid often of being wrong that they never risk being right. So we look at America that once taught grammar, logic, and rhetoric. the tools of reason in our schools. Today, we teach compliance, comfort, and grievance. We tell children they're victims instead of victors. We reward emotion and penalize excellence. We've replaced the pursuit of truth with the worship of identity. That's not enlightenment, that's decline. A nation cannot rise above the philosophy it teaches to its children. And if that philosophy denies truth, reason, and merit, the civilization will collapse under its own confusion. So rebuilding this will not start in Washington or Silicon Valley or anywhere other than in the human mind, yours and mine. That is the big reason why behind this Steve Beaman journey, to recapture our liberty and our freedom at the truest sense, is to recapture liberty and freedom for us. And whether that's emotional freedom from a past problem or financial freedom to reset your life after a problem or any of the truths of the 5 paths, it's this enhancement and enjoyment to our lives that we need to push forward. So there are some practical tools for intellectual strength, and I want to just go through these, and hopefully every day you can take this to heart. First, read. And read slowly if you must, but read. Take one chapter of a great book. Just read one chapter, because that one chapter of a great book far outweighs the value of 100 scrolls that you see on your phone. Write. Journaling clarifies thought, and it cures confusion. So let's go back to journaling and writing. Debate civilly. Disagree without disrespect. This is a lost art, and it is certainly worth reviving. Question your sources. Ask who funds the facts. Where's the money behind that particular show? What's the agenda of that movement? Follow the motives, not the hashtags, and reflect daily. Truth grows in silence as much as it does in study. Because the battle for truth won't be won by those who scream the loudest. It will be won by those who think the clearest. So recognize as we travel the intellectual path that it guards every other path. Without intellect, emotion becomes manipulation, finance becomes greed, and spirituality becomes superstition. We live in an age where truth must be defended, not with anger, but with understanding. So each of us can be a soldier in that quiet war for reason. So tonight, I urge you to think deeply, question bravely, and believe boldly. Because the future doesn't belong to those who scream the loudest. The future belongs to those who think the clearest. Well, I'm Steve Beaman, and this is the Steve Beaman Journey. So walk wisely, my friends, and have a blessed day.